Gameplay to raise cybersecurity awareness. Background: school learners and information technology. It is essential for school children to become aware of how cyberbullying can affect them or their friends. Growth of cyberbullying. Most incidents of cyberbullying occur while the student is at home. However, the problems lead into the classroom, making cyberbullying an issue that cannot be ignored. Cyberbullying is a growing problem with increased adoption of the internet. The theme of this project is based around cyberbullying. Our problem statement is there is a need to raise awareness. Cyberbullying awareness demands the youth about the relative safety and security behaviors. So the primary research question is, can an educational game be designed to raise a school learner's awareness about cyberbullying and how it should be correctly dealt with? So our main point was to create an educational game to raise awareness. Our primary research objectives is to produce a game to raise the school learner's awareness about cyberbullying and how to prevent or mitigate it. Our problem area is based around that there is a lack of knowledge around the seriousness of cyberbullying. Cyberspace presents real risk and a danger to children. Victims of cyberbullying would rarely report cases of being cyberbullied and may feel ashamed, so they tend to not ask for help. Schools do not have adequate knowledge about cyberbullying. Teachers are also frequently ignorant of the cyberbullying and how to teach a child to mitigate the risk or the consequences of such an experience. Objectives and methods used. We would use a literature review to describe cyberbullying and how an educational game can raise awareness. And we would create this prototype to develop an educational game as an intervention to create awareness in schools. With the literature review, we would also investigate the outcome of the intervention and how it can be used to raise awareness. And with our game, we would develop a social media awareness campaign to raise awareness about cyberbullying. We used literature reviews and prototypes for our research methodology. For our methodology, a literature review states by Rousseau that the purpose of a full-length literature survey is to provide an analysis and summary of existing literature on a particular topic. For this research project, a literature review was used to find existing literature on cyberbullying and different awareness campaigns, as well as how significant this impact is to other learners within the same school environment. A prototype was created in the form of an educational board game that can be used to teach and educate children in the school environment. The following steps were taken into account. Current cyber law in South Africa does not take into account the fundamental rights and legal procedures. We needed to identify that there was a need for awareness formulated through our school administrators to review and process actions and opinions for incident reports and evaluations. Children these days have access to the internet. If a child does not have access to a mobile device, they would probably have access to a computer, and this technology and internet access is growing every day in the world. The following steps were taken into consideration when designing the solution. It needed to be identified that there was a need for the awareness. It also needed to be identified the level of cyberbullying at schools, and information was needed about previous awareness implementations. Our solution would need to educate staff, teachers, and learners about cyberbullying. After that, the solution would need to be finalized, then implemented. There were also considerations made for future adaptations as well as changes to make the educational game more complex, but also to cater for different age groups if it need be. So why was an educational game chosen as the solution? The reason a board game was chosen was because the ages that start to use information technology as well as mobile devices and computers were roughly around the age of 9 and 10. So this age group was targeted for the intervention. Considerations need to be taken when assessing a child's age and their mental capacity. When a child reaches the age of 9, a child was sufficiently able to understand simplified information. The game was simple enough for students from the age of 9 to understand and comprehend. And when the child would reach 14, they were able to develop a level of understanding comparable to the level of an adult based on their ability. So children at the age of 10 would have an age appropriateness for the content and the delivery of the teaching methods, such as learning from the board game. This is usually the age that the child would be introduced to the internet. This is a picture of the game that was designed. So the rules of the game are fairly simple. A total of 2 to 6 players can play, and all players would start from the start. The players would start in sequential order and would roll a dice and move the number of spaces according to the roll of the dice. If a student landed on a green pathway, they would be allowed to skip a certain amount of steps, which would mean it was a do action. If the student landed on a red path, it would mean it was a don't action. This is important because it allows positive and negative reinforcement. The player that reached the end of the game was considered the winner. So the do's and don'ts were basically lessons of what a young student would be able to interpret easily. There are various advantages of implementing the solution of the board game, as it can increase student attendance, it will help create a safer digital environment, and students will be able to distinguish right from wrong from positive and negative reinforcement. The conclusion is that the significance of an awareness game shows that young learners can be taught by positive and negative reinforcement, and the awareness game would be an ideal candidate for testing in a real-world environment, as it aligns with its fundamental principles with similar awareness programs that are available online. Future research. The design of the game was simple implementation of what can be done on a broader scale. The game created is a simple version that can be adapted easily to include different and even more variations of lessons. Future versions of the game can be tested in different environments as well as different age groups. Thank you.